Thomas Hobbes was an eminent 17th-century English philosopher whose ideas have profoundly shaped the contours of Western political thought. He was born in 1588 in Westport, England, during the tumultuous period leading up to the English Civil War. Hobbes bore witness to the political turmoil of the 1600s, including catastrophic events like the English Civil War between parliamentarians and royalists from 1642 to 1651. England was embroiled in violent chaos as Charles I fought Parliament for control of the nation. The war ended with victory for Parliament and the execution of King Charles I in 1649. These formative experiences shaped Hobbes' philosophical perspective. Living through the bloody Civil War convinced him that strong central authority was necessary to maintain order. The unstable era he lived in led him to formulate his theories on stable government and the social contract. Hobbes' most influential work is the 1651 text Leviathan, which expounds his political philosophy. At the heart of Leviathan is the idea of a social contract, whereby individuals mutually agree to form societies to improve their self-preservation. Hobbes argued for vesting power in a sovereign to enforce social contracts and prevent lives from being solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Hobbes' social contract theory was groundbreaking and influenced the likes of John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. His dark portrayal of human nature shaped philosophical discourse, and his emphasis on stable central authority justified the rise of absolutism in Europe. While criticized by religious and political authorities in his time, Hobbes' ideas became the bedrock of social contract theory and political philosophy. They sparked debates that still rage on philosophical views of human nature, rights, state authority, and the role of fear as motivation. To understand Hobbes' state of nature, imagine a scenario like the lawless period following a natural disaster. Without externally imposed order, people act purely out of self-interest and survival instincts. Resources become scarce, leading to competition, conflict, and fear. Hobbes argued this state of nature showcases man's impulse for self-preservation, which necessitates the social contract. The state of nature is the hypothetical natural condition of humankind before organized societies imposed laws and order. Hobbes views it as a primitive state of existence with no morality or justice. In this anarchic environment, rational self-interest governs human behavior. With limited resources, humankind's innate primal urges for self-preservation lead to constant conflict as people compete. The state of nature is marked by mistrust, violence, and chaos. Hobbes' key assertion is that the state of nature would be deeply unstable and dangerous, where every man is enemy to every man. Resources are scarce, leading to selfishness and aggression. He deemed it a war of all against all, where life is nasty, brutish, and short. Hobbes argued that humankind's inherent self-interest and survival instincts would overpower any sense of morality or justice. He saw this as man's natural condition before civilization's constraints. We can observe a state of nature dynamic after disasters, during conflicts, or at overcrowded events. Limited resources lead to unrestrained self-interest. For instance, panic buying during the COVID pandemic led to stockpiling and empty shelves. Human survival instincts override social conventions in the absence of order. Hobbes' social contract theory proposes that rational individuals agree to form societies by mutually and consensually giving up absolute freedoms. This contract establishes moral conduct, laws, and government imposing order on the anarchic state of nature. Hobbes argued that sacrificing some personal liberty in favor of order is beneficial for self-preservation. He saw the social contract as a trade-off. Citizens relinquish freedoms, and the sovereign provides security so their lives are no longer solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. The mutual agreement establishes a common moral framework. Citizens agree to abide by societal rules and the sovereign's authority in exchange for the benefits of political order. Everyday civic obedience, like following traffic rules, illustrates the social contract. Citizens collectively agree to give up the freedom of driving however they want in exchange for orderly, safer roads enforced by the government's authority. Traffic laws provide a mutually beneficial framework. Hobbes argued for a sovereign holding absolute authority to enforce social order. The citizens transfer rights to the sovereign through the social contract. Hobbes deemed absolute authority necessary to prevent citizens from regressing to the chaos of the state of nature. Hobbes contended that only a unitary sovereign could ensure civil cooperation. He believed that humankind's inherent selfishness necessitated a strong central authority. Without a sovereign to enforce contracts, citizens would return to pursuing self-interest at the expense of others. Modern governments maintain contracts between citizens by establishing laws and institutions. For instance, the judicial system enforces contracts and property rights through a common authority rather than individual action. Hobbes would argue that government preserves social cooperation. Hobbes stressed that the primary motivator in the state of nature is fear of death, lack of resources, and violence. He argued this fear drives humankind to willingly submit to authority for self-preservation through the social contract. Hobbes posited that people choose to give up unfettered freedoms because fear motivates them to avoid the anxieties of the chaotic state of nature by ceding power to a sovereign. Fear of punishment also discourages contract violations. Citizens obey laws like stopping at traffic lights because they want to avoid legal punishments. Fear of penalties motivates lawful behavior. As Hobbes theorized, the fear of consequences sustains social contracts. Workplace dynamics. Office politics provide small-scale examples of Hobbesian philosophies. Employees consent to workplace rules to maintain order and further professional goals. They moderate selfishness for mutual benefit. Etiquette and relationships. Social etiquette also follows a loose social contract where individuals agree to norms for harmonious interpersonal relationships. Manners mitigate outright self-interest. Hobbes would argue etiquette stems from mutual self-preservation. Modern democracies allow citizens to shape the social contract. People vote in the collective interest, consenting to be bound by electoral outcomes and majority rule for a stable society. Critiques and relevance. Hobbes' ideas have been widely criticized. Some argue he exaggerates humankind's selfishness. Many dispute his notion of absolute sovereign power. Thinkers like John Locke argued for limited government, while Rousseau claimed man is naturally benign. Evaluating relevance, scholars debate the applicability of Hobbesian ideas to pluralistic modern democracies. His unitary sovereign conflicts with divided government and individual rights, but Hobbes' stress on order and social contracts still resonates in political philosophy. Critics contend Hobbesian social contracts can justify sacrificing civil liberties for order, but democracies argue certain rights are inalienable. This highlights tensions between Hobbesian philosophy and modern notions of immutable freedoms. In summary, Hobbes portrays the state of nature as brutal anarchy mitigated by social contracts enforced through absolute sovereign authority. Fear motivates individuals to willingly trade liberties for order, but critics argue Hobbes understates human complexity and overstates the need for authoritarianism. Impact on political philosophy. Despite criticisms, Hobbes fundamentally shaped modern political thought. His seminal ideas still influence social contract theory applied to democratic governance and civic duty. Hobbes' depiction of humankind's baser instincts provokes debate on human nature. While Hobbes' state of nature is an intellectual construct, it prompts reflection on societies with fragile order, and it bears recalling that democratic systems rely on citizens' consent through participation, compromise, and acceptance of collective outcomes, illustrating continual negotiation of the social contract.